Welcome to the Top Dog Mindset Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of running a successful dog training business. I'm your host, Kevin, joined by my co-host, Angel. Together, we bring you expert insights, inspiring stories, and practical tips. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, we're here to provide you with the necessary information to build a thriving dog training company. So relax, join us with a cup of coffee as we explore the Top Dog Mindset Podcast.
All right, welcome in everybody to another episode of the Top Dog Mindset Podcast. Kevin and Angel here, and today we're going to be talking about some. Hold on, let me redo this whole thing. I usually nail this first take, but it's whenever we have to take the photos first, and it messes me up. All right, welcome in everybody to another episode of the Top Dog Mindset Podcast. Kevin and Angel here, and today we have a topic that is going to be meaningful for me. I hope it's meaningful for you, Angel, as well. Just because I feel like this is something that's been on my heart the past couple weeks here. And that's the idea of nobody ever said building a business was going to be easy. And there's going to be difficult things that come up along the way that you never thought you were going to have to face. And so there's been a couple things over the last couple of weeks that have been truly kind of trying, for lack of a better term. And I mean, I'm not going to go into necessarily like specifics and stuff like that, but maybe we can go into a couple specifics. But I just, have been thinking about this because, I was going through just like, reviewing, the past couple of weeks and what's been kind of going on. And I kind of had this epiphany that if you're trying to build something that, not many people have done before, and nobody in your family has done before, your friends haven't done before, and stuff like that, and you're kind of like venturing out into your own uncharted territory here, it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be painful. And what I always think about is if it feels hard building a business, that's because it is. And this is exactly why most people never do this. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, I mean, building this big business right alongside of me, I'm sure that you've faced stuff like that before, certain things being very difficult that you never even thought were going to be the difficult things when you first started working with me and helping me grow this company. So what are your thoughts on this? And just, how have you seen that kind of like impact you and your experience in business?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed over the years, like certain time periods throughout the year where I kind of know ahead of time, like around this time of year, it gets, a little stressful or it gets busy. Things change a little bit. It's not like the normal day-to-day kind of stuff. And so, yeah, there's just like, again, time periods throughout the year that I'm kind of prepared for, or like we're all prepared for. But then there's other times, kind of like some of the stuff that we've been dealing with where it just happens. It kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's like, a new learning process. And it's obviously something that I experience with our clients as well, being that, we talk so much, talk on a pretty regular basis. And so I'm hearing those pain points on their end. I'm hearing when they feel like they're reaching burnout or, things are going really good. And then all of a sudden they run into something like super unexpected. And so on my end, being the one who is like helping coach them through things and being their support system, or as much as I try to be, or like their shoulder to cry on, so to speak, it's easy to give like those pep talks to them and let them know, like, basically like what you said, no one's ever said that building a business was easy. And these are just growing pains. And this is part of growth, essentially. Even like conversations that I have with people before it gets to that point, like let's say someone is getting ready to hire someone, like I can easily have a conversation with them by letting them know ahead of time, like, hey, this is kind of what to expect. Making this hire is going to make your life a little bit easier because that person is going to be taking over, this entire task, or they're going to be able to take on, this amount of dogs and taking some off your plate. But keep in mind, like, it's not going to be an overnight thing. Like, there are going to be growing pains. You're going to have to obviously go through the process of training that person and kind of like handing the reins over a little bit, allowing yourself to be a little bit less of a control freak with this person. So yeah, I've kind of seen it on both ends, being the one like giving the pep talk to them and then also experiencing it on our end as well. And fortunately for us, like we have a very tight knit, like good cultured team. And then obviously you and I are very close. So I think that's really helpful for us to be like a good support system for each other and kind of give each other those pep talks of when one of us is stressed out, the other one of us helps like kind of like ground each other. Because if we're both equally stressed out and freaking out and spiraling, then it'd be an absolute shit show.
And something that I totally agree with everything you just said. And something that really I've been thinking about is it's very easy to think to yourself, there's me, like Kevin, and then there's my business. And they're separate. And what I've realized is when you're a small business owner, everything can become so intertwined. And people say that stuff like, "Hey, it's not personal; it's just business." And I understand where that like sentiment comes from, but at the end of the day, at least for me, it's hard to not take things on a personal level sometimes. Like say you're dealing with a stressful situation with a client or something like that. It's like you as the human being, yes, it's your business, but you as the human being still needs to deal with the emotional impact of like dealing with somebody who's not happy, and having
Hmm.
that really difficult, hard conversation with them. And there may not be necessarily a resolution that's going to make all parties involved happy to hear. And
Hmm.
so, I just think that this is something that, I've been thinking about. I'm kind of formulating my thoughts as I say this. So if I'm not making that much sense, I apologize to anyone who's listening to this, but I'm just, thinking that it's difficult in ways that I never thought it was going to be. And you think like, oh, what's going to be hard is signing up clients and creating that new marketing campaign or training that dog. But the really ironic thing is what starts becoming difficult later on are just things that you never would have imagined. So
Hmm.
having to tell somebody, like this relationship isn't going to necessarily work, like we can't continue on with this client agency relationship, or even people in your circle, like I get along with this person and I get along with this person, but they don't necessarily get along. And so there's just
Hmm.
like weird things like that have happened that, I think can cause a lot of and I don't feel like I'm doing the best job possible here, like articulating exactly like specific things, but it's what I'm really trying to get at is like it's usually the emotional side of things that's the trickier thing to kind of work through, and that I think can be real stumbling blocks in your business, not the like tactical like optimizing an ad account or your sales process. I mean, the emotion can tie into the sales process too, I would say, but yeah, like I think that this is the stuff too that can lead to burnout. It's like having to carry like the emotional weight of being responsible for other people, making decisions that's in the best interest of the company as a whole, making the best decisions for your clients, all that stuff. And that stuff can just weigh on you. And I think that's why most people fail, and why
Hmm.
most people quit when they do it. And what I mean by that is like there's that statistic that's like whatever percentage of businesses go out of business in the first year, 80%, and then 90% are out of business in the second year. What I notice for people is it's usually not like they don't it's lack of ability. It's like the emotional fortitude or the emotional availability to continue to give themselves to the business.
Yeah.
So we've seen this many times where, using dog trainers as the example, people will come into our community and we'll launch ads for them and they'll do great and they'll make sales. And then in like 3 months, things have kind of stagnated a little bit for them. Right. And this is
Hmm.
not everybody, but what we've noticed for the people who do stagnate around that like 3, 4, even 5, 6 month mark, it's because they're like emotionally fried and they're like,
Hmm.
well, these leads are no good. Right. And then what you realize is, well, let's take a deeper look at that. And when we look at it, it's like, hey, you're still getting, it's the same marketing campaign, same landing pages, same automations that are being sent out, same targeting set up on the map. So the leads are the same, right? There can be different variables, there can be different times a year, but the leads are the same. But the only thing that's different is the way that you're handling the leads. And so what I've, noticed from people, and I was just talking to Leanne about this, how, people, if they're being honest, can sometimes just be like, well, I just don't want to do consultations anymore,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I can understand how you arrive at that point. You're like, it's exhausting driving around, going to meet with people, getting told yes, and that's exciting. That's like an emotional high. Getting told no, that's really painful, especially if you get a couple of those in a row. But this is what I mean by like the emotional side of it, you know? It's
Mhm.
not that anything really changed in your market. It's not that anything really changed in your business. It's just that like your emotional availability to do what you used to do 6 months ago has kind of changed. So Angel, why
Yeah.
don't you kind of pick up there? Because I feel like I'm rambling at a certain point here. So why don't you pick up there and give me your feedback on it? Because I know you and I have talked about this many times.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. It has a lot to do with emotions. And I also feel like that's usually a hard thing for people to recognize on their own. Cause like you said, like they don't recognize that it's like their emotions that are changing or even their motivation and discipline to continue running the business the way they were doing it in the beginning when they were super excited and looking forward to running a business. They don't realize that stuff has changed. And so, yeah, people try to look for a problem elsewhere in their business or with the marketing or even with their specific clients, even if they're already working, with certain people. And I think that this can manifest in a lot of different ways. Like you mentioned, people will start to do consultations less and less because it's painful hearing no, especially if you go to like 3 consultations in a row and each one says no. But then over time, that kind of like starts to build up and you get sick of it and you're like, why am I even driving around? So you start doing less of that. And then that can kind of transfer over to the way that your phone calls are going. You might not be as, maybe initially you had a process where it's like, this is how my conversation goes. And the end goal is every single person is going to get on a consult. But then maybe that changes to where it's like, okay, let me have a little bit more of a conversation with this person to try to vet them better because maybe I can try to just handle all of this over the phone instead of scheduling a consult. So now you start changing your process, or even I've seen in some cases where people will start to just be really short on the phone. There's no rapport building. They're not asking the person's name. They're really not asking anything. They literally just answer the phone and then whatever that person called to ask about, like if it's like, hey, I just wanted to get some information about your pricing and what kind of training you do, and they literally just answer that one question, and then the person's like, okay, I'll think about it, and they're like, okay, cool, and then they get off the phone. 90-second conversation, and they've essentially given all the information away. And so, yeah, over time, there's like little changes here and there that they're doing because they're exhausted and they're getting burnt out. And they just, feel like I don't have time for this anymore because like I have to do this and I have to do this. I don't want people wasting my time, all that kind of stuff, without realizing like these little changes that you've been making along the way have been essentially changing your entire process and almost your entire business model. And that's really like why you're seeing those changes. But yeah, I would totally agree. It's like all coming from emotion. And people can be really hard on themselves too. Like even when it comes to even just training the dogs in general, like it's good to have high or set high standards for yourself and like the dogs that you want to send back home and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I can even understand firsthand how that can affect you. You start getting like too down on yourself and stuff like that. So obviously with someone who is actually running a business, like they're kind of doing the same thing and then it's just like a ripple effect into everything else in your business.
Yeah, and I think a really good analogy is you look at how someone starts their business and how excited they are and where they are and how they're feeling about it 3 months in, 6 months in, a year in, 5 years in, and 10 years in, right? Really a good analogy is like almost looking at people at different phases of their life. So, I have a couple kids, and Angel, I know you have children as well. And, I have nieces and nephews. And when you look at little kids, they're just like the purest form of like love and just being a human being, and like they haven't been jaded by the world yet. And then you
Hmm.
look at somebody who's like, we've all met this person, right? They're in their like 60s, 70s, 80s, and they look old, they look really worn down, they're not healthy, and they're not happy. And life has really had its way with them. And I feel like, you start off one way. You start out like looking at things in through one lens, and you end up in a completely different place. And it's all about the in between. It's all about like what happens to you. And so sometimes you can genuinely be victimized. Sometimes you make yourself the victim. But I just, was thinking about that and, having kids and being around kids and like how innocent they are. And I've seen
Mhm.
that with our clients where like when somebody comes in and they're just starting their business and they're very innocent and they're very like excited by the opportunity. And then as time goes on, like you get some difficult clients and you start realizing who you like to work with and who you don't like to work with. And you can start getting very jaded and start like when somebody calls you being like, this person reminds me of that person, so I'm not going to take them on as a client, or I'm just going to give them a price over the phone to get them to go away.
Mhm.
And so it's like all that stuff that's the in between. And I've literally seen people who in their first month or 2 or 3 months, they're doing 20K, 30K. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, they're like, oh, there were no good leads this month. And it's like, it's not actually that. It's the way that you're perceiving the leads and the way that people are perceiving you. And to
Yeah.
your point from before, you start getting very short on the phone, or you just start referring everybody out and you start looking for a unicorn for a client. Whereas before, even if someone wasn't necessarily a good fit, you're like, I'll still go meet with them. I'll still give them the time of
Mhm.
day. Maybe I'm judging a book by its cover here. Maybe if I talk to them, I can kind of like persuade them and make them see why doing this program or this program would be good. And, I've been going through some of our clients' phone calls recently, actually. And I literally had this happen where one of our newest clients, I just messaged her. I was like, dude, you're a rock star on the phone. You did an awesome job with the first couple leads that came through. You got them set for consultations. Excellent work. And she was like super excited. This is going to be, fantastic. There's more to come. And then I was looking at somebody who, I was listening to his calls and I was like, you don't have that energy. It's something has changed. And,
Mhm.
we're going to talk to that person and help guide them and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's just really interesting how you can see that happen, how one person is just excited by the prospect of getting a client, and then the other person is kind of like already disqualifying them just after 30 seconds. And, people say things like, I can tell who's going to be a good client and who's not.
Mhm.
And I know what you mean by that. Like, it's not that I don't have those thoughts and feelings too, but I'm saying this all from a place of like a realization that I've come to recently where I need to catch myself and I can start rolling my eyes getting on a phone call with somebody in the first 30 seconds, go, they're not going to buy. This is going to be a waste of time. How quickly can I get off this phone call? And sometimes you're right. And the problem with that is like when you're right and you draw that immediate conclusion, it reinforces the belief that you can judge a book by its cover and you don't need to go and actually give people the time of day. But every once
Mhm.
in a while, you are kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised, and you start digging a little bit deeper with them and you do build a connection and they surprise you and do buy a program and they are a great client and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's important to stay open-minded in that regard.
Yeah, and I know that I've explained this before on probably a couple different episodes, but I think it's really helpful to explain it this way of like as a business owner, especially if you are just like a one-man team, you're wearing a lot of different hats and I think it's super important to really like really keep in mind what position you're in when you are in it essentially. So like when a call comes in, um, you are the appointment setter. You should be a really good one because you are the owner of the business, but you're the appointment setter. Your job is to schedule the consultations. When you are with that person, meeting with that person for an in-person consultation, you are the salesperson and you are a really good one because again, you are the business owner. You know the ins and outs of everything. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind for like each of these positions in your business. Because thinking of it from the perspective of like if you were to have an employee, have someone whose job is to just answer the phone, schedule consultations and stuff like that is their job. And if they get to a point where they're like, starting to maybe try to vet people a little too much over the phone, or they're like talking to someone, they're like, oh, I can tell this person isn't going to sign up. So let me just not schedule them. You're going to start to notice the downfall in their work. And eventually it could get to a point where they're doing so poorly that you have to let them go. And so I think it's important to think of yourself like as an employee for each position in your business. I think that would be helpful to kind of keep that in mind in order to like hold yourself to that standard versus being this person who like you are only listening to yourself. You are telling yourself what to do. And so it's a lot easier to kind of get wrapped up in those emotions and, kind of like get short with someone on the phone or just not have as much energy with someone on the phone or maybe judging them a little too early, which I know people do a lot. Maybe I would say very unintentionally, but someone calling and they're like, oh, I just want to get pricing on training. Very, very often people say like, "Oh, these people aren't serious. Like they're just calling about pricing. They're not serious about training." Well, why not? Like money, I want to know what things cost. You know what I mean? Especially if it's for something like I don't know shit about. I don't know what to ask. I literally just want to know how much it is. So I think it's very normal. But yeah, thinking of yourself like as an employee in each position in your business and then holding yourself to that standard that you would hold your employees to if you did have a team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's perfectly said. And that's exactly what I was trying to get at before when you start judging a book by its cover and people start asking, "Hey, do you use this training do you use training tools?" Or, "Hey, what are the pricing?" Or, "Hey, do you offer, this program?" And, for each one of those, you can just immediately go like, "Here we go again. This is going to be another one of those people that don't buy and they're already asking about this, or they're looking for a specific type of training, or they're looking for training on a budget. They're not serious about paying any money and investing in their training, or they called asking about board and trains and I only do private lessons." And I think a lot of people in the beginning would, using the training programs as the example, would probably be like, "Hey, well, we actually offer a variety of programs to our clients. Here's what we typically start out with is a completely free consultation where we can meet and we can go over exactly what's going to be best for you and your dog." And then what
Mhm.
you notice like a couple months later is, "Oh no, sorry, we actually only do board and trains. So if you were interested, like what would happen is you'd send your dog to us for a 4-week period. We do all the training and that starts around $4,000." Like the amount of
Mhm.
times I hear that phone call, it's like it's really pretty amazing. And then what you inevitably hear from that is, "Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, we'll have to think about that and get back to you." Or, "We're really looking for private training," right? And so
Mhm.
the conclusion that you draw from that is I vetted them out and they were never serious about doing private training. They're looking for this. I never could have sold them. But had you gone and met with them, yeah, you may be right. They may have not bought. But at the end of the day, it's like you would have had a way chance of getting them to buy a private training program from you or a board and train. So that's the example we're using. You had a much better opportunity to sell them a board and train had you met with them and really had the opportunity to explain them on, "Hey, you're still going to be involved in the training here. We actually
Mhm.
send dogs home on the weekends. You're going to get a transfer session every single week." Or, even if you don't do it that way, "Hey, there's going to be updates all between the program and you're going to get multiple private training sessions at the end as a go home and continued support and stuff like that." And, I don't want to turn this into like a sales podcast or anything like that. We've obviously done that many times, but I just really want to use this as like an opportunity to give people the opportunity to maybe, potentially hit the reset button a little bit. And if there's anything you can identify with this and go like, "You know what, I have been a little bit short, or I have been kind of qualifying people a little bit too heavily, or I have been doing X, Y, and Z." But bringing this full circle back to the initial reason for this episode is you do this stuff because it starts getting hard
Mhm.
and you start trying to find the easier way. You start trying to weed out the people to only get the good clients, right? And only find the people who are going to give you the highest probability of saying yes to you. And it's not that that's, you can't do that stuff and you can't want to work with good clients and, pre-qualified people and stuff like that. But if you're at all struggling in your business and or not even necessarily struggling, but just you are not hitting the mark that you're capable of hitting, and you're not hitting the mark that you want to see you hit in your business to hit, then it's important to do some self reflection and think about like, how am I maybe doing some things that are maybe a little bit self sabotaging? And
Mhm.
again, I think that people start doing this stuff because it starts getting really hard and the
Yeah.
emotions start weighing on you of like having to meet with people that didn't buy or working with an annoying client and all that stuff. And again, what I always think about is like if it feels hard, it's because it is hard. And this
Mhm.
is exactly why most people will never do it. But the question you need to ask yourself is like, do you want to be most people or do you want to be different?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is there anything else you want to add to that, Angel? Anything else that's on your mind for this podcast you think would be helpful for anybody?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you saying giving the suggestion of doing just like a complete reset, I think is really good feedback. And that's not like completely rebuild your business and restart everything, but just like you said, just like take a step back, really think of everything. What were the systems and processes that you had in place when you were doing good and when you were happy, when you felt like you were enjoying running your business, and go back to that.
And two things I'll finish up with. You're not meant to do everything in your business for forever. And
Mhm.
you don't need to wait 5 years or 10 years to hire your first employee. Don't wait that long. If you're having $30,000 months, $20,000 months, even $15,000, $12,000 months, and you can afford to hire somebody to help alleviate some of this stress, the example that I gave the other day, I forget if we were on our client coaching call or just talking to our team, but I think this was on one of our group coaching calls where dietitians would tell you like never go shopping for food when you're hungry. Because when you go shopping for food when you're hungry, you buy a bunch of junk food, right? Because you're like,
Mhm.
ooh, that looks good. And it's the same thing with this. It's like, don't wait to hire somebody and until you're like so burnt out and can't like stomach talking to your clients anymore, or hire a trainer because you can't stomach doing another board and train session or consultation or anything like that. It's like you're not going to hire the right person. You're just going to make an irrational decision to bring somebody in when you just desperately need a warm body in there to do something, and then they're not going to do a good job because you're not going to have the bandwidth and the emotional energy to train them, and then all
Mhm.
of a sudden it's just another self-fulfilling prophecy where they end up not working out, and then you're like, see, you can't find good people, and they were never trained, they were never qualified to be the right candidate and all that stuff. So get out ahead of this, bring
Mhm.
somebody in while you can actually like give yourself to actually training that person properly and building the business the right way, instead of waiting until it's too late and now like you're forcing the issue.
Yeah.
The other thing is I noticed for myself that like this stuff starts feeling very heavy to me and like it's a big weight that I'm carrying when it's the only thing that I do with my life. And so I have this habit, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify with this, where like you can start slipping into the habit of like the only thing I do is focus on my business. I'm always answering emails, I'm always answering calls, I'm always talking to clients, and I never do anything else for myself. And you need to block out time for yourself so that way you're energized going into and working in your business. If you never
Mhm.
have time to go and grab a beer with a friend, if you never have time to go and play in that like men's basketball league, or work out or go get dinner with people, genuinely hang out with your spouse. Like all of a sudden it just feels like you have had everything else in your life taken away from you and all you're here to do is just be a part of this business and be a cog in the wheel. And so don't
Mhm.
do it that way. Take it from me. Like I've done that and it ends up just burning you out. So
Yeah.
be intentional about how you book your time
Mhm.
and how you treat yourself, because ironically if you do this other stuff outside of the business and take care of yourself, you're actually going to perform way better in your business.
Even something as simple as actually blocking out a lunch break in the middle of your day to
Yeah.
stop what you're doing, stop training dogs, literally just take a break. Your brain needs it, your body needs it. You need food, normal human thing.
Yeah,
And we all just like don't do it or don't make it a
exactly.
priority. Or we're like, oh, we're eating lunch, but I'll do it while I'm driving to this consultation, or I'll eat lunch here at my desk while I'm still like going through all of these tasks and all
Yeah.
that multitasking, which is great, but in the long run, like your body needs that break.
No, 100%. Yeah, like, I mean, I've found myself doing things that are frankly kind of insane, like you have 5 minutes to eat in between calls, or not even, you have 0 minutes to eat, and then you are showing
Mhm.
up to your next call late, right? Because you were just trying
Yeah.
to eat something. Or I've even done, like, calling a client, and then you're, like, putting them on mute while you eat your food so that way they can't hear you, but, like, they probably know anyway. But anyway, like, just, like, doing stuff like that, and so
Mhm.
also filling that time, like, giving yourself 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes to actually have some time off in the middle of the day and then not using that time to like doom scroll on your phone and look at, Instagram or something like that. Are you feeling very called out right now?
Yeah, I feel like you're looking at me specifically.
I'm speaking directly to you. Somehow I know exactly what you're doing. No, I'm speaking from personal experience, and like getting outside and getting in the sun,
Mhm.
going for a 15-minute walk, eating a good lunch. That is the stuff that just like makes you feel so much better and not just feel like, again, I'm just a cog in the wheel and this business controls my life.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, we're gonna wrap things up here. But I hope you guys got some value out of this. And I would just finish up with this: like, treat yourself with kindness, treat yourself with respect, and recognize that you're trying to pull off something here that most people will never even attempt trying to pull off in their entire life. And so it's not easy. So just recognize that, again, if it feels hard, it's because it is. Give yourself some grace. And if there's anything that we can do to support you guys, if there's anything that you feel like is difficult in your business that you want to hear about, make sure to drop it in the comments, because I love kind of talking about these more like philosophical style ideas. And yeah, we just want to support you guys in any way we can. So with that being said, we're going to wrap we're going to wrap the podcast up here, and we will see you guys all very soon. See you guys.
Bye, guys.